So now that we're moving into Unit 5, we first have to review slope-intercept form from algebra. And hopefully you remember that slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And it is called slope-intercept form because you can see the slope and the y-intercept inside of the form. So the number, m represents a number that is in front of x, so it's basically the coefficient of x. That is your slope. So your slope always goes with x. So wherever x is, your slope should be. And if it's properly in slope-intercept form, the term that with the x in it will be right behind the equal sign. So right after the equal sign will be your x term and will be your slope. So you could see your slope, and then after the x, the number after x, or we could say to the right of x, that will be your y-intercept. So that is the number to the right of x, your y-intercept. Remember, your y-intercept is basically where the graph crosses the y-axis. So first we'll look at the equations and then we'll look at the graphs. So like for instance number 1, it gives us a slope of -1/2. So since that is our slope, notice over here your slope is your m, so that is going to go in front of an x. So this is our m. I'm going to put an m there so I know it's our m. And remember our y-intercept, if you look back over here, our y-intercept is our b, and that is going to go after the x. That's going to be our b. So in the form y equals mx plus b, if we just substitute these numbers in place of the letters or the variables, we have y equals -1/2 for m. Gotta have the x next to that one since it's the slope, and then the b is -4. Now we're not going to put plus -4 because that looks like you don't even know what sign you were dealing with. So you just use whatever sign the b is. And since b is -4, we're going to put -4 for b. And that is our final answer for slope-intercept form, which is what this section asks you for. Basically just asks you to write it in slope-intercept form. So I'll just do like 2 of these with you. Let's see, for instance, number 2, we'll just do 1 and 2. So once again, this is your slope, so that is your m, and this is your y-intercept, so that is your b. So in the form y equals mx plus b, we have that m is -1, so -1, always bring down your x, and then your b, which is 1, it's a +1, so I'm going to put +1. Now, remember that you don't necessarily need a 1 in front of x. So since it's a 1 here, we could just put -x. So a better way to write it would be y equals -x plus 1. So that would be the most simplified way to write your answer. Alright, and then lastly in this section I just want to mention on number 5, when you get your y-intercept is 0, remember that's your b. So you're going to end up having, well, we'll just go ahead and do this one, it's fine. I'll do half of the section and you'll do the other half. So that's our m, that's our b. So we have y equals mx plus b. Well, here's our m, so -3/4 x plus b, our b is 0. Now adding 0 to something isn't going to change anything. So it's actually not simplified yet until you write it without the +0, because +0 is not going to do anything to the -3/4 x. So your most simplified answer is y equals -3/4 x, and without the +0, because adding 0 is not going to change once again. Alright, so you can actually just leave your answer like that instead. So go ahead and finish up the rest of those in that section, and maybe pause here before you look at the next section. So in this next section, you're actually taking the information off the graph this time and then writing the equation. So to do that, I'll just start with number 7. Remember, slope-intercept form of a line is y equals mx plus b. So remember the two things in that form is the slope. So we're going to need to get our slope off the graph and our b, which is our y-intercept. So we also need our y-intercept off the graph. So if you just start with the y-intercept, you can kind of see where your graph crosses this y-axis. Here's our y-axis, and we want to know where the graph crosses or touches at. And it touches it there. That is at 1. Notice it's going up by 1 unit each time. It's just putting the numbers in every other number on the grid so that it could actually fit. So that is at 1. So our b for this one, we know b equals 1. Now we just have to get our slope, our m. So to do that, we already have 1 point there with our y-intercept. You need a second point so that you can count your slope. So you basically just kind of want to follow your eyes along this line until you see it touch a perfect corner. Perfect corner. So it looks like it might right there at that arrowhead. So instead of using that point, which may be kind of, maybe it touches kind of point, I didn't mean to say it like that, but basically if you go the other way, you can kind of see, is there a place where it touches directly, and it looks like it touches there directly at the corner of the boxes. So use that as your second point, and now hopefully remember that the slope you can find off of a graph by doing the rise over the run. So if you always start at the lower of the 2 points, which would be the second point we found that I'm making bold now, that lower point will cause you to always have to rise. So when I say rise, I mean go up. So basically, you want to see how much you go up or down, put that number on top of a fraction, and then how much you go left or right will be on the bottom of the fraction. And then we'll simplify if we can. So starting at that bottom point, to get to that second point, we would rise 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice we're going up, so that's a positive 4. And then we would have to go over 1, 2, 3. Notice we went to the left 3, so that's a negative 3. So our slope, if we do our rise over our run, we have our rise was positive 4 over our run, which was negative 3. So our slope is negative 4/3. Now the negative, some people say, well, where does the negative go? Does it go on both? It's just a negative fraction altogether, because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So it's just a negative 4/3. Now that does not simplify. It doesn't, you don't have to change it to a mixed number or anything. You just want to leave it as an improper fraction. Don't change it to a decimal, because we do want slope as a fraction if it's not a whole number. That way we can see the rise and the run. So now that we know our m, and now that we know our b, that's not our final answer. We have to actually write it in slope-intercept form. So that is y equals m, negative 4/3 x plus b. And our b is positive 1. Alright, so hopefully you remember this a little bit. If not, hopefully I'm refreshing your memory. Or that you maybe just remember it a lot. I don't know. But let's just do a few of them so, we continue to refresh. One thing you also want to check, though, just to make sure you're doing your slope sign correctly. Notice that the line in number 7, it is going downhill from left to right. And so, therefore, your slope should be negative. And it makes sense because it is. So if I look at number 8, I notice from left to right, it's going uphill. So I know I should end up with a positive m, a positive slope. Alright, so let's go ahead and look at that. So remember, the easiest thing to see off the graph first is that y-intercept. So track that y-axis, see where it crosses, and it touches right there at negative 2. So just trying to undo so it's not so messy. So I know right now my b is equal to negative 2. And now remember to follow the line and see if you can find another place where it crosses exactly on the corners of the boxes. So it looks like it crosses there pretty good. So now if I count my rise and my run, just undoing those middle lines in between. If I do my rise and my run, remember if you always start at the lower point, it'll make more sense because you're trying to do rise first which is up 3, so that's a positive 3, and then run 1, and that is to the right 1, so that's a positive 1 since it's to the right. So the rise, remember m is rise, so you got to put the rise number on top, the run number on the bottom. So my rise was positive 3, and my run was positive 1. So that actually simplifies to a whole number, or I should say integer, because it could be a negative. So we're going to leave m as just 3, and our b is negative 2. So now we can write y equals mx. Well, that's going to be 3x, and then b is negative 2, so minus 2. So that's our final answer for the slope-intercept form. And remember, since it is going uphill from left to right, it is a positive slope, so it makes sense with the sign of our slope. So now I'm just going to bounce around a little bit. I'm going to do number 10. We talked about lines like this in the very beginning of the course. It's been a while, so I'm not sure if you remember, but any vertical line, so I'm just going to put that here, any vertical line that goes up or down, that's vertical, is going to have the equation of x equal to whatever number it goes through the x-axis at. So this equation is x equals 4. So it's just that simple. There's no slope to this line. It's actually an undefined slope because it goes straight up and down. You can't really walk up a hill if it's not a hill, if it's just a wall, for instance. I mean, that's like going up a wall. So it really doesn't have a slope. It's just standing straight up. Now the other case would be if you had a horizontal line. And remember, horizontal line is left to right. That actually has a slope of 0. M would equal 0 because it's flat. A flat line where m is equal to 0, when you try your y equals mx plus b, you'd have 0x plus whatever your b is. Well, notice 0 times anything is just 0, so this whole term would go away. So really, you're just left with y is equal to a number, whatever the b is, whatever your y-intercept is. So for a horizontal line, the equation is just y equal to the number. For a vertical line, the equation is x equal to the number. So if we look at a horizontal line like number 13, we know it goes through the y-axis. So it goes through the y-axis, so it does have that y-intercept of negative 5. So the equation is just y equals negative 5, since there's no slope. It's completely flat. Alright, I don't really know that these are going to vary much, so I'm not sure if we need to do another one, but why not? We'll do one more. We'll go with, how about one where the arrow is like number 9, where the arrow is actually hitting the y-axis. So remember to get your b and your m off the graph. I like getting the b first because it gives me at least 1 point that I'll deal with. So my b is at negative 5. And then remember to get a second point. If you just follow the line, you hit another point immediately. So if you notice, all the line goes through all those corners. It doesn't matter which one you use as your second point, like someone else could use a different one, it's all going to simplify to the same number. So if I just use the first one that I marked, and I look at my rise and my run, I rise 1, so that's going up 1, so that's positive, and then I run towards the negatives 1, so that's a negative 1. So my slope would be my rise first, which is 1, over my run, which is negative 1, so that just equals negative 1. So I just want to show that one if someone used a different point besides the second point that I used. So for instance, if someone decided to use this point up here, well, notice to get from the bottom point to the top point, you would rise 1, 2, 3. So that's a rise of 3, so it's positive. And then you'd run 1, 2, 3 to the left, so that's negative 3. So no matter what, when you do your slope, you would have a rise of 3, a run of negative 3, well, notice that simplifies to negative 1. So regardless, you'll get a slope of negative 1 as long as you choose 2 points that lie on the actual corners of the boxes, basically at perfect integers. It'll be easy to simplify. Alright, so now to write the final answer, we have y equals mx plus b. So y equals negative 1 x plus b, but our b is negative 5. And remember, you don't necessarily need a 1 in front of x, but you do need that sign, so don't forget that it's a negative. And then minus 5. So that's your, where's my equal sign? Where's my equal sign? There it is. Alright, so y equals negative x minus 5. I don't even like the way that looks, so I'm going to have to fix that negative sign right there. Gotta be picky sometimes. Alright, so there we go. So go ahead and finish the rest. If you have questions, just text me.